Hello everybody and welcome to this webinar of the Promoting Technology Enhanced Teaching course of the European Schoolnet Academy. My name is Mel Carrera and I'm Pedagogical Officer here in European Schoolnet. Very warm welcome to all of you who are joining this webinar from many countries across Europe. We're very happy to have you on board on this webinar today. As usual, the webinar will last for around 1 hour. It's being recorded, so you will find the recording of the webinar fairly soon afterwards in the relevant section of the course, which is in this case 1.8. So you are now working on module 1, which is about the TET-SAT tool, a new online self-assessment tool for teachers. And to guide us through this tool, we have with us Daniela Cuccurullo and Katia Engelder from European Schoolnet. Daniela Cuccurullo is an English professor, clear language and digital teaching at the Universities of Naples and Viterbo. She is also secondary school teacher of English, teacher training, forum moderator and author of e-courses, MOOCs, learning objects and digital content with particular reference to multimodality, emerging issues and teaching technologies for new target groups such as pre-service, primary and subject school teachers. On the other hand, we have Katia Engelder with us. Katia is a colleague from European Schoolnet also. She joined the knowledge building team in 2012, and since then she's been supporting several projects such as Mentep, TET-SAT or NEST. And she regularly prepares reports and studies such as the study and analysis of educational approaches to developing computational thinking, the so-called CompuThink. And besides, she also has a lot of expertise on areas related to programming, computational thinking as 21st century skills, online teacher training, MOOCs, online self-assessment, mobile learning, special needs education, and accessibility of information. So they are both the right speakers to guide us through this topic today. And the way that the webinar will work is that at the beginning, Daniela will present her own experience with the TET-SAT tool as a teacher, and afterwards both she and Katia, who was closely involved in developing and testing the TET-SAT tool, will be happy to reply to any questions that you may have about this, and we'll also be replying to the questions that you have been posting in the Padlet of the course. So this being said, I give the floor to Daniela. Daniela, whenever you want, the floor is yours. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining.
Hello everyone, and thanks for joining us to this webinar. In this webinar that is within the MOOC course Promoting Technology Enhanced Teaching. Just to remember, the webinar will be recorded, and I'm here with Katia Engelgard that will take part in this webinar later on. I'll start with you. And my role today is, as you can see in the title of this webinar, to test the technology enhanced teaching self-assessment tool, as I will try to demonstrate that it can be used in different ways and in different perspectives. I'm just a potential user now, and I want to show you that the process that is ongoing on while we are just taking this test. This is the reason why I try to define this as a meta digital tool, as it enhances a sort of metacognitive process while taking it. First of all, I would say that it can be personalized according to your use. So someone asked me if there is a difference being a teacher training, a primary teacher, secondary school teacher. I can see that it is according to the different person, and there is no obvious process that goes on while we are taking the test. It is according to you, according to your personal interests, according to your personal competencies, and to the context you refer to. Let's start with the first slide. You can see that I define it as an every which way tool. Why do I say that? As you can recognize, we are now in the area of digital pedagogy. Just to remember, for people who have just enrolled in the course and have not tried the tool, the TET-SAT is divided, is based, or it has been implemented in 4 different areas. The first one is digital pedagogy. The second one is on digital content use and production. The third one, as you can see at the top of the page, is on digital communication and collaboration. And the fourth and last one is on digital citizenship. The whole tool has been implemented with 30 different questions, and I'm now analyzing the first one that belongs to the first area, the question one, that is digital pedagogy. First, let's consider the way it has been structured. I mean, the sequence of the different options on the page. You can see that we have an arrow that moves from the left hand side towards the right hand side. What does it mean? If we read the 5 different descriptors of this first question, that is develop, implement, reflect and redesign ICT supporting teaching and learning strategies with ICT, I find myself faced to 5 different possibilities. The first one is the lowest one. I have limited or no experience of using ICT for teaching or learning purposes in the classroom. And this is the lowest level that we can have when we have no ICT competence at all. Then I see that the second possibility is something more. I implement ICT as a tool to support common teaching method and tasks, and can I adapt my teaching to create new learning experiences for my students. The third one is something more again. I use ICT to support not only teaching but also learning. And even if I need more competence to implement ICT to improve my teaching and my students' learning. The fourth option is something more again when I can develop ICT supported teaching and learning strategies to enhance my teaching and reflect on a regular basis on meaningful use of these strategies. And the last one, that is the highest level, is I reflect upon my ICT-based teaching through critical and systematic assessment of the teaching and learning processes, and I redesign my teaching strategies accordingly. Well, let's reflect on this first option, which is something that you can find in any framework by default. It means that I have a sort of gradual sequence that moves from the lowest stages of ICT competence to the highest one, as far as the target question is concerned. I mean that it is a linear progression. We can have a natural expectancy that we are very competent, and then we can choose the fifth one. We have low competence, and so we can decide, we recognize ourselves in the first option, while if we are in the middle, at intermediate level, we can choose from the second to the fourth one. Well, it is very simple in this case, but it is not always the same situation, because sometimes the situation can change, and I want to show this to you. In this case, you see I have put numbers random because I found myself faced to this possibility. The question is always in the digital pedagogy area, and it is number 4. Designing personalized student activities according to needs of students. It means their interests, learning preferences and styles, sound, images, and etc. Well, I can find that no competence in regarding this topic is on the left-hand side, but strangely it is on the right-hand side, where we can find I have very little or no knowledge of how ICT can support the personalization of student learning, and I do not use ICT for personalized student activities. So no competence at all regarding personalization and designing of personalized students' activities. Where do I find the second option that is just a little bit on a step higher than the first one? It is on the extreme left. I have some knowledge about personalized learning, activities with ICT considering different students' needs, but I found it difficult to find suitable activities for my lessons. So while I have some knowledge, I found still it difficult to implement, to design personalized activities for my students. Well, now I have to choose which is the third option if I consider that I have both some knowledge and I have also the possibilities to find some activities. Well, what can I decide? The third one, I implement personalized teaching and learning activities using technology to support students' needs and learning preferences, or I design personalized students' activities where ICT is used to identify and support individual student choices and needs and learning preferences. The choice is between implementing and designing personalized activities. And so this can be referred to the context. So it is a sort of meta personalization. It is up to you. It is up to your competencies, it is up to your context, it is up to your the situation and the time you want to design and personalize activities. While I can say that what I decided to be the fifth option, the highest one, is when I can design the activities where ICT supports the students in taking responsibility. And it is something stronger because students are being responsible for their learning. I mean, when they choose their topics, when they use technology, and when they are able to manage their own learning inside and outside the classroom, referring this case both to formal and informal processes of learning, their own e-portfolios. That is really something great because it has a strong potentiality both for students and teachers because students are autonomous, are responsible for their learning, and they are creating their own activities and they are also putting them in a sort of a digital e-portfolio. So as you can see here, there is no obvious solution. You can, of course, you can decide that you are just at the beginning of this kind of activity. Having digital competencies doesn't not mean that you can be the best for each of these 30 questions. And this is the reason why we are just pushing your self assessment and giving you the possibility to have a real feedback on what the situation is going on and how you can solve the blank spots, I can say, the gaps that you need to improve your teaching and also your professional improvement. So in this case, you have the possibility to choose, but what I say is that in this case also the tool takes your time. It is very demanding because you have to read through between the lines and you have to reflect and you have to choose with attention which is the option that best suits your own needs. There is not a right answer or a wrong answer. It is just up to you. That's why I say that there is a sort of personalization. You can move from one side or the other, or you can say that the tool has been created and built randomly so that each person can read between the lines, can reflect and choose the option, and can also reread it. This is why we suggest that there is no time to take the tool, the test tool, to test the tool, but you can do that anytime you want and repeat it, and you can also discover your process and your progress. So why not? Let's have a look at another question. We are always in the digital pedagogy area, and the question is question 3. Well, I see that I have underlined that I hardly ever or never design teaching and learning activities with ICT to engage students more in the learning. So we have no idea hardly ever I design, while on the extreme right I use existing digital content and learning environments to differentiate my teaching to create engaging activities and students. So in the first case, we think that if we can design activities, in the second case, if we can exploit resources. And this is also a good point because I have to be able to, to select materials and to adapt these materials according to my students' needs and to the context, to my teaching process. So, of course, it is, however, a digital competence. In the second option is I find some inspiration on the internet. So I always refer to the internet, but I just see inspiration. So I do not use existing digital content, but I find inspiration to make engaging learning activities and I try to implement some of them in my teaching. So it is a totally different situation. In the first case, I never use, or sometimes I do. In the other case, I use what is already been produced by other people and hopefully shared. And but I differentiate the activities I found. The third one is I find an inspiration. Then I have the third option, that is the fourth reading. I adapt, I redesign my teaching and learning strategies. So I find materials, but I adapt them and I also redesign. So it is another step beyond. And I also evaluate. So there is another point to consider. That is a sort of evaluation of the suitability of the methods I've chosen according to students' needs, engagement, and goals. So there is another element that I can consider the evaluation of how they can be adapted to my student situations. And the last one that, according to me, is I create digital material and learning environments. So there is another point to consider because it is not only a matter of digital material, it is also a matter of learning environments. So I'm opening up new spaces, new learning spaces, virtual spaces or any kind of virtual environment I can consider to differentiate my teaching. So I do that, but according to the different constants in a different way. And I also have the possibility to alternate pedagogical methods. That is, it belongs to the area of digital pedagogy. And here I can just adapt my choices, my pedagogical choices, using ICT and again the creation to create engaging activities for students. Well, I just wondered which could be the best choice for me because I can do that according to different situations. I can use already existing materials. I can find inspiration and create new ones. I can adapt but also redesign and in the same time I can evaluate what I'm choosing according to the needs of my students, or I can even create different things and just I can reflect to the pedagogical methods. As you can see, there are lots of opportunities, lots of possibilities. There is not the right answer, as you can easily find in any digital or in any kind of framework where there is always a linear progression, even if it moves from the left to the right or upside down if it moves from the right to the left. But it is always a gradual progression. And sometimes when we face these kinds of frameworks, we are just pushed not to think because we are familiar with our competencies and so we say, well, I'm the best in this case, I want to choose the fifth option because it is surely best and the highest one, or I'm not familiar and I think I recognize that I'm just I have to learn in that field and so I choose the first option. No, this is not the case because the tool is powerful in this situation because it helps you think, reflect, and this is the reason why I said it is an every which way tool, and it can be always personalized according to the activities. So it really implies careful attention and careful choice. And this choice can be different according to your different times. I think that you can start taking the tool now at the end of the school year, but you can take the tool again once the school year, the next school year starts, or whatever you want, whenever you feel at your own pace, at your own time, you'll find a different solution. As it is it's the same when you read a book. According to your own personal situation, you read something different. But let's have another example here. And here there is, it is the question 7, always with digital pedagogy, that is plan, use, and evaluate digital tools to be integrating in the teaching and learning process. I mean, these ICT devices, digital tools, and software, internet networks. Well, this the key words here are I'm confident with choosing and using digital tools and devices to carry out new tasks, and that I would not be able to do without the technology. But there is also another point. I can help colleagues. So here we have a new element. Here we have the peer teaching process because I can help colleagues to choose the right technology in their teaching. And in this case, I'm shifting from my teacher role to my trainer role because I can help colleagues in doing that. And I feel quite confident. The second option is I'm quite confident with selecting and using different types of digital tools or devices. So not totally confident, but quite confident, but to enrich my teaching. So it is something that comes back to me. And so I can do that. I can enrich teaching and I can support students' learning. I have an alternative if the technology lets me down. And this is very important because in this case, it means that we do not always trust on technologies because sometimes we can face technical problems. And so the problem here is that I have always to find an alternative, a different solution. And so, of course, I do not want to read because I have other examples and also want to just to answer your question. I'm seeing that you're just writing in the chat, so I want to go on my presentation, but then we can interact and share our reflection together. It was just to say that if you read carefully between the lines, you can find different possibilities, different options, and you have to select with critical thinking is the best option that suits your needs. One more example is when I want to shift. Before I had the possibility to to help my colleagues. Now I have a real example that I can shift from one role to the other role. This I underlined here. What can I be? A teacher or a teacher trainer? Here I am in the area of digital communication and collaboration, and the question is number 23. Using ICT for teamwork, for collaborative processes, and for the common creation of resources, knowledge, and contents. Well, the first option in the balloon is I hardly ever use ICT to collaborate with my colleagues and to contribute to the common creation of knowledge, resources, and contents. So there is implied the sort of collaboration with colleagues. The second one in the balloon is I train my colleagues to use ICT for collaborative processes. So I am a step beyond. I'm not in the same position, because in the first one I just collaboration, but here I am a trainer, so I train my colleagues to use ICT for collaborative processes of a common building of creation of resources, knowledge, and content. The third one, the last on the right hand side, is I teach my students to use ICT in collaborative processes as a common building and creation of resources, knowledge, and contents. So here you have to decide who do you want to be. You want to be a teacher and you want to read under the perspective, with the perspective of helping your students, or you want to be just a teacher and consider your professional role within the school system. Or the third option, you want to be a teacher trainer and you want to consider how to help other people. Well, this is the reason why you can test the tool according with different hats, with different perspectives. And for each result, for each feedback, you will get different resources as an opportunity to improve your case. One more. Why did I pick this answer? And I say personal or professional field. As far as the digital citizenship is concerned, the question 24 is regards teachers' knowledge, competence to interact appropriately online. If I know basic behavior, I mean basic behavior norms that apply when communicating with others. So it is my professional field. Or I know little about rules and behaviors when communicating online. Again, it is when I act on the internet when with my professional hat, or I'm a teacher. I encourage my students to reflect on their online behavior. So I help them to discover how to behave and which are the basic norms. And then I know the principles of etiquette and can adapt my behavior according to different contexts. This is again a personal perspective, or again towards students. So here I also have possibilities, different possibilities, and I can choose according to what I want to say. And again, I say that I can recognize the tool as a meta digital tool that enhances processes of cognition, metacognition, because they are processes on digital cognition. What in any case the tool helps to do is that it puts you in the position to understand where you are and where you want to be, because it gives you plenty of opportunities to move onwards, to go beyond, and it empowers you as a teacher or as a personal professional person or as a teacher trainer, but empowers you to set your goals, because you can read which are the other opportunities, and so that you can progress in technology enhanced teaching training, teaching or personal fields. It pushes you, in a word, in a nutshell, to be over the edge of technology and to go beyond. And this is the reason why I say that it enhances digital cognition. I hope that I have given you a general, a critical way of reading and testing the tool, because there is no way that is the same for everyone. It is always different, not only for the different people who test the TET-SAT, but it is always also different for each person that test TET-SAT according to a different perspective at a different time. And now I think that I've just said so many things that it is time to answer your questions. We have collected lots of questions on the Padlet, and for this,
Yes.
me and Katia, thank you very much. And so I leave the
Thank you.
word to Nair.
Thank you, Daniela, for this very useful presentation. I hope the teachers learn a lot. And as you said, there was some questions in the Padlet, so I'm just gonna put here the link to the Padlet so that the participants also see the questions. And I'll give the floor to you and Katia to answer to these questions.
Yes, thanks.
Maybe Daniela, if you want to share your screen with also with the questions in the Padlet so that we can see them in the
Yeah,
screen.
I can do that, of course. One moment. Okay, I have the Padlet here, and
And in the meantime, feel free to post any question in the chat, and we will ask those to both Daniela and Katia at the end of the presentation. So first, they reply to the questions in the Padlet, and then you can ask them any question that you want.
okay. So, can you see my screen, my desktop?
Yes, we
Okay, so
can.
as you can see, we have plenty of questions. And so thanks to all the people who joined this Padlet and had it some, well, I want to just go through them. And there was one that had been posted already yesterday, and I want to reflect on that because there was a Flavia, I think, was asking how to use the tool in training a situation. And I want to answer to this question because to start answering this question because also in the forum lots of people in particular Italian people try to reflect on the different possibilities of using this tool in a training session, but they wanted to have some hints to do that. And I think that we can, as you see, we can test the tool in different ways, but we can also use the tool in different ways, in a lot of ways. I would say that as they are four areas of reference, I would start talking with people if they are familiar with these different fields. I mean, digital pedagogy, digital content use and production, digital communication and collaboration, and also digital citizenship. Why do I say that? Because familiarization is also the starting point of the Bloom taxonomy, where we have a linear and a gradual process of learning. So when I want to put people face to a new tool, as someone also said in the forum, they could be afraid of using it. So the first point is to get participant to any training course be familiar with what they are going to do. And so a discussion, a participated discussion, and a brainstorming activity could help. So I say these are the different areas on what on the where the tool has been based on, and these are the areas that we want to go deeply inside. Can you say which could be, for example, next step, the possible questions that can belong to the different areas? In this way, during my training session, after a familiarization and brainstorming activity and a participating discussion, I could have four different groups work together just to brainstorming what could be the possible questions. And then I will give them the feedback with the 30 questions put random in a sheet of paper or on the blackboard, whatever you want, and just ask people to decide to which one of the four areas each question should belong to. In this case, I can get people be familiar with the four areas and recognize the possible questions inside the areas. And I'm always only at the basic steps of my training session in this way. Next steps should be now let's realize that each question has some descriptors, and according to the trainers to trainees needs, I can decide to work or on one area uh, for different lessons, or randomly choosing two or three questions for each area. And as I did with some people, I tried to ask them, now you have descriptors, decide which could be the ideal scale or reflect, as I did with you at the beginning of this workshop, why one option could be best for you instead of the other. Or another possible activities could be to hide some descriptors and give, for example, only three options and give people understand, guess, also with some hints which could be the two hidden options. So these are, I think, for Flavia, but also for all the people. Yes, Flavia is here. Can I suggest how to effectively introduce TET-SAT to the other teachers in our schools? And this question was repeated some other times also in the forum, because here in Italy we have a very important digital plan, and so there are also some people, some teachers who are responsible for the trainers of their colleagues. And I think that Flavia and all the other people who asked the same question wanted to just know some possible solution of how to choose it in a training session. I hope I have answered all the first one. I can now give the floor to Katia if she wants to pick some of the questions and give her contribution to that. Katia, you're there?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, of course.
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So I'll just pick one other question, which was about reliability. I don't know who asked the question. I didn't see the name. So the question was, how can we sure that the results are not subjective? So it's a very interesting question and something we've also been asked before by policymakers. And the first answer is that it is a self-assessment, so it will never be entirely objective. But that's also not our goal. And there's two things to know. The first one is that there is no objective test of digital competences there yet. So you can also imagine that especially testing pedagogy, digital competences in pedagogy in an objective way online in particular is very difficult. So first of all, we don't have another opportunity to test the digital competences otherwise. But also the second point is that we do think, and that is something you will hear a lot about in module 2, that the TET-SAT does bring you closer to a much more realistic self-assessment. And you all had a look at the tool because it describes what you could see as small scenarios. So you're not asked to position yourself on a scale from 1 to 10. So that's my answer to.
I think Daniela, because your microphone is muted because there was some background noise.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So I think that people are adding posting new contributions, so they move. I had seen some. Yes.
Okay, so then I
Vasily.
think it's better if people in the So the attendees, if you have any question, instead of putting them in the Padlet, just type in the chat, and then we can take your questions from there, because otherwise it can get a bit messy, I think.
Okay, so shall I stop sharing? Is it better?
No, it's fine. It's fine if you want to pick up the questions in the chat, in the Padlet, okay. And then we come back to the questions in the chat if any. Be reminded that we have around 15 minutes left.
Okay, so I've found what I meant before. Vasiliki is now on the left and from Greece, and the question is it applicable for all teachers? I mean both primary and secondary, and appropriate for all lessons. Well, I think that we cannot say that it can be appropriate for a lesson or not, because it is more on the digital competencies that teachers or people have, and it can refer to a specific context or to a specific lesson, but it is inside the description of the questions and the different descriptors that we can understand in this direction if it can be appropriate or not. While the question if it is both for primary and secondary teachers, I would say that it is for everyone. Of course, out of 30 questions, I wouldn't say that they can be appropriate. The third of them can be all appropriate for primary teachers. And so in this case, you have to do a selection, because as you can read through the lines, between the lines, there is also, especially in the digital citizenship, when we see the idea of a copyright, it is difficult that primary teachers refer to copyright in a deep way with their students. Or of course you can have problems of using images, and you can have your students recognize the importance of quoting the author of that image or that picture they chose. But sometimes the questions are based on an advanced level of using the technologies of our students, because if the teacher is highly competent, of course it can enhance different situation with his or her students that are supposed to use the ICT in the classroom in an advanced way, and this is not the case at a primary level. So I would say that 15 or 20 questions can be considered appropriate for also for primary teachers, and that some imagine that the implied virtual worlds or the communication online. Sometimes we do not have very young children that use e-learning situation, e-learning paths in their learning. So I would say yes, it is for everyone, but please be critical and select the questions and the opportunities, and so create your own tool within the TET-SAT. Katia, can I give the floor to you for another question? Do we have time?
Definitely. And in the meantime, if anybody has a question spontaneously, please do not hesitate to use the chat. Otherwise, I will continue with two questions from the Padlet. I will start with an easy one, which is, again, without a name. Could you please comment on the scientific researches on the TET-SAT and the platform? And there I can simply say that you will all hear in a lot of detail about that in our second module, which will start on Monday. So there's no need for me to comment on it now. Just all come to our second module. It will be very interesting. And the second question, which is also a very good one, I think is from a teacher, an English teacher in a small village in Turkey. And he said that he doesn't have any smartphones, computers or mobile devices in the school. And that in that case, how reliable is the result of the TET-SAT? And it's true that if you, if you do not have any technology in the school, that you cannot show all your competences in technology enhanced teaching, that then you can also not reply to the TET-SAT questions in the same way. Which is why also when we tested the TET-SAT during the field trials, something we will hear about next week, we actually only included schools with a minimum level of digital equipment in the schools. So in the sense, if you are a teacher in a school with no technology, then you're right to say that the TET-SAT score that you receive also has something to do with the lack of equipment. I mean, that is a very fair point to make. And maybe the last question I saw on the Padlet from Nazim is about how a standard, since each country has a different viewpoint policy. So you're referring to different frameworks that there are, for example, the DIGCOM framework on a European level, but there are also other frameworks, and it's a very good point again, and something we're also discussing with policymakers and others. So to start with, our TET-SAT tool is based on different frameworks. One of them also the DIGCOM framework, and our TET-SAT tool is the outcome of a common effort of all the 16 countries that are involved. So what you can see the TET-SAT involves, includes at least the viewpoint of those 16 countries. But when we now discuss also in the third module what to do with the TET-SAT afterwards, you will also hear that there's it is indeed a good question, like is TET-SAT, does it fit all countries' policies or not? And if I may, I also see Flavia's question, is it possible to create your own tool within the TET-SAT? No, that's not the case. So you can only reply to the questions as they are. What Daniela was referring to, that was simply the fact that she thinks that a number of questions is more relevant to primary teachers than others, but it's not the case that you could simply change the TET-SAT as it is at the moment. Daniela, did you see any other questions that we missed in the Padlet, or does anybody else have a question? Put it in the chat.
Well, I can just comment on what I read on forum because someone added posted questions in the forum too. And I think that they were enthusiastic about the TET-SAT, but they say that sometimes they have colleagues who are more traditional, and so they find it difficult to widespread the powerfulness of this tool, and especially among headmasters. That should be the first promoter. Once a headmaster enhances digital processes, the situation at school is easier, of course. And I think that only just having people, someone said a right thing, just to say that is not an external evaluation. It is for you, to you, and with you. It is just self-assessment. When you take the test, you only self-assess your own digital competencies and you get your feedback. And it is for you, not for anyone else. So as people, especially in Italy, but I also read some people from other countries are quite afraid of being evaluated by other people, other teachers, or by other people in general. It is very important matter to underline it is self-evaluation, self-assessment, and it's better to say self-assessment because it is not something that is closed. Assessment is quite different from evaluation. You have an evaluation at the end, but so you can start your learning processes thanks to the plenty of resources that you find on the platform. But as it is an ongoing evaluation, we can call it assessment. And I think that you have to underline this. What I want also to clarify what I said before, primary teachers were concerned. People can select questions, but you can also create your screenshots with the different options and just decide for primary teachers which can be the best solutions to deal with during a training course, even if they do not complete the test, but you just use the descriptors as hints to reflect on and to widen your idea of the different option and possibilities to implement digital technology enhanced teaching in your classroom. It is not that you can modify the tool that is online and it is as it is, it has been created, but you can just select materials for just screenshots or questions or descriptors just to lead your training courses. That's why I said you can create your own inside. Even if when I had my training courses, I had the opportunity to use TET-SAT even in Brussels during the final conference, and we had a short session of training. I just chose 2 or 3 or 4 questions and had people reflect, discuss, share ideas, and improve as professional teachers or trainers or policymakers in that occasion. I don't know if there are other questions.
Daniela, if there are no, yeah,
Data.
we are going to have a keep an eye on the chat, but in the meantime, I will quickly reply because Daniela, I think you said several really interesting things. Just to underline what you said. So the first one, indeed, you give a good example how you can, as a teacher, also be creative with the TET-SAT. So you maybe don't need to fill in all the 30 questions, but as you described, you could also use it in other ways. So that I found really interesting. I think it's also interesting for you maybe that some people in Europe already even tried the TET-SAT out with student teachers, so those that are still studying, and even those found the TET-SAT relevant, even though they are not our primary target. You will also hear more about that still during the MOOC course. And 2 other quick points, Daniela, what you said, that school heads are important, that we can only support from our experience. So if you're lucky enough to have a school head that supports you in your school, that is so important. But I know probably not everybody joining us now on the webinar will have a school head that helps spread the use of innovative tools, for example. And the last point I wanted to make was the question, I mean, who should use TET-SAT as a teacher? You will also still hear more about it next week, but our idea is not necessarily that everybody has to use TET-SAT. So it's not like every teacher in Europe we think now needs to use TET-SAT. It's really first and foremost for those like you that are interested, that are maybe also a bit more more interested in technology and more willing to try out new things, and that is great. And probably in a second phase, it's also interesting to teachers that need a little bit more guidance. Your colleagues maybe can also get some support from you, but we fully acknowledge that there will probably also be some teachers for whom self-assessment is not the right way of training, and that is also perfectly fine. But if already such a tool like TET-SAT is, interesting for quite a number of teachers in Europe, that is excellent, because we don't think that anybody needs to be trained the same way. Daniela, do you have any last words? Because I still don't see any new questions.
No, I've just scrolled the different questions on the Padlet, but I think that we covered all the main points. Of course, we can keep on discussing in the forum, and if there are other people who have their posts on the Padlet, I will be happy to answer And as you said before, many things will be discovered during the module 2 and module 3. That's why we didn't answer all the questions, because they are matters that will be faced and discussed all along the course. So I think that we can, I think that we have covered the main topics. So for me, that's okay. People, if they want to add whatever they want to add to the forum, we can just dedicate a thread to this and keep on discussing there.
Thank you, Daniela. Thank you, Katia, also for your insights, for your answers. I'm sure they were really useful for the participants. And as you said, Daniela, if they were asking before if they could post more questions in the Padlet. So if you're happy to reply to the questions, then they can go for it. And before ending, I just wanted to remind our participants that there will be 2 more webinars as part of this course. So how to run a policy experimentation on the 8th of May at 11, and also how to test TET-SAT tool in your own context on 17th of May at 11 as well, Brussels time. So make sure you also join us for these 2 webinars. And I think that's it. I don't know if Daniela or Katia, if you want to mention something else. We will record so we are recording the webinar, and we will share the recording in section 1.8 in a few days. So Daniela or Katia, you want to mention something else?
Just one more thing. I would say that people are sharing in the different in the forum with different contribution that they have tried the TET-SAT, but I would also reflect on the feedback they received, and just to face different possibilities, different solutions. So I think that I started with this a cognitive process on TET-SAT. It is not just a matter of I did and I found it great or not, and how can I use it. I just want that you now go on and try the tool again, just reflecting and adding a new contribution of my flow of thinking. So the different options can give possible alternatives. So let's reflect on that. That's what I want you to do from now on.
Okay. So thank you very much. Thank you, Daniela. Thank you, Katia. And thank you, everybody, for joining. And I wish you all a very nice evening. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.